Hi, I'm Don Weatherbee, the CEO of regenx.tech, and I'd like to give a little bit of a history here is that I come from the mining world. And so I'm familiar with the need and the requirements and all ills and greats of mining industry. But for the future, we can't count on continuing to be able to mine. We have to find alternatives to replenish the resources we get from the ground. Regenex is a company that is regenerating platinum and palladium from used catalytic converters and allowing them to re-enter the circular economy.
Future Optimist.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, Don. I love stories like this because we need people like you who identify things and opportunities from an industry that they're in and to recognize that there's a better way. Obviously, most people out there probably aren't intimately familiar with the mining industry. I know I certainly am not. But we rely on people like you who are insiders to see things and to tell us. I think some of us are vaguely aware of the idea that a lot of rare elements, rare earth materials, elements in our phones and in various electronics are finite and that there are only so many deposits of these things around the world. Can you shed some light into the situation as it is and why maybe mining isn't sustainable?
Sure. So in our industry, in the platinum group metals, it already isn't sustainable. The current demand outstrips what can be produced from the mines that even exist now. So there's already a requirement to recycle platinum and palladium. About 35% of current usage comes from recycled sources. And in the mining side, 80% of the mined materials for platinum and palladium comes from either Russia or South Africa, which have its own set of geopolitical risks around trying to count on those being secure supplies for the future.
That makes sense. So why are these materials so important? What do they end up going in?
So platinum and palladium, the majority of the use for them right now is in the catalytic converter industry. And why they're so important in that is that they're a reactive metal. And I'm going to talk chemistry, but I'm not a chemist. So I joke I play one on TV here. So,
okay.
So what they do is in a catalytic converter, the concept of a catalytic converter came about in the 70s, and it was to reduce the smog gases. And anybody who was around before catalytic converters can remember our cities were hell places to just walk around. The air was all thick and ugly. Well, catalytic converters have done a remarkable job of cleaning that air and taking those smog gases and converting them to a less harmful CO2. Not saying it's perfect because CO2 still has its own issues, but it was better than having the smog.
Sure.
And how it does that is that platinum and palladium reacts with those gases and oxidizes them, changes your carbon monoxide to your carbon dioxide. And only specific metals can do that effectively. And so for it to be able to be reactive, you have to use these specific metals.
That makes sense. That's the reason why so many people steal catalytic converters from cars. I mean, that's a big issue in urban areas now, mostly from regular cars and not diesel cars. We'll get into that in a second, sure. I'm sure. But is that why? Are they stealing it for the materials contained within?
Yeah, because platinum and palladium, most people don't follow them, but they're worth over $1,000 an ounce. So they're valuable material. And so that's what's being stolen and that's being processed through.
So I'm really fascinated by ideas like this because it seems like such a crazy sector. It's something that most of us don't think about. So how did this business idea come to you in all of this? What made you realize this might be possible?
So we kind of walked down a widening path. I said we started in the mining industry. Well, Regenex is a long historied company, and it was an exploration company. It was one of these companies that tried to find properties that had resources in the ground and was looking to do that. But back in 2015, we started to look at the landscape and went, our future really isn't in exploration. Our future is in technology. And we had the opportunity to first look at a material processing technology that was intended to reprocess tailing material from gold mines to get out extra gold that wasn't economic when it was 50, 100 years ago. And as you're starting down paths, people start to see what you're doing and start asking questions of how you could modify this. And we modified into e-waste. And then we had an opportunity presented to us by a group we work with, Davis Recycling, saying there's a niche in diesel catalytic converters Would your process work for it? So 2020, we started down lab work of investigating, could we do it? And that's how we've worked our way through from your simple test tube tests to actually having an operating plant now in Tennessee.
That's amazing. So what's the difference for the uneducated among us between a car's catalytic converter and a diesel catalytic converter? And why is that significant for the purposes of recovering PGM?
Sure. So like I said, there's about 30% recycled. But that's mainly from gasoline. And the biggest difference between a gas and a diesel is that diesels run much hotter. So in a catalytic converter, I said that you had the precious metals. Well, those precious metals are coated on a honeycomb structure because you want as many different facets for that air to move over as quickly as it can to create these reactions. Well, in a gasoline vehicle, that honeycomb is ceramic. And so the current majority recycling is done by smelters, large furnaces. That just melt everything down. And that works really well with the ceramic. Diesels, because they run hotter, they don't use ceramic. They use what's called silicon carbide as their honeycomb. And that silicon carbide is a lot more robust. And so when you put it into a furnace, they have inefficiencies. And so they don't like to run inefficient, so they don't want to run this material. And it wasn't as big of a deal because back the catalytic converters weren't highly used on diesels, but regulations have increased and increased what type of vehicles need catalytic converters. So it's becoming a bigger and bigger piece of the pie.
Wow, that's interesting. So then what was your insight that freed this up to be able to recycle it without relying on smelting? Or does it still, but in a different way?
No, so what we do is what's called hydrometallurgical is our technology, which means that we do a leach. We're liquid, where we're using chemicals to separate out the platinum palladium from the substructure. And so our technology, first off, separates out the platinum palladium and puts it into a liquid solution. Then we take that liquid solution and we add another chemical and we have the platinum palladium recreate into a solid form. And then that's ready to be final refined to pure platinum and palladium. So the biggest difference is they use heat and we use chemicals.
Yeah. Okay. And had anybody ever done anything like that before?
It's known science. There's all kinds of long-term science that does it. But what it is, it's a combination of chemistry and physics, mechanical. Because you're dealing with chemicals and you're dealing with different states of material, you have to have a real good handle on how to process the material. And that's where our history came in. Is that we came it from the processing side, not the chemistry side. The chemistry was fairly simple. It's having these materials move from state to state, from station to station. You've got liquids, and you got slurries, you got solids. And how do you have that all move in a confined area?
So if 35% is the baseline, what do you estimate the upper limit? What percentage could theoretically we get to with this kind of process?
Well, there's two parts of that side. One is that the amount that's required is growing. So saying a percentage isn't necessarily right because you're still going to have that base load mining, but for the growth has to come in through extra recycling. I mean, when we look at the last 8 years, there's been an undersupply of platinum and palladium of 259,000 ounces a year. So it's already required to have more to keep up to the current demand.
And like everything else in life, it's ramping up, not down.
Yeah. And there will be a part where electrification will take a part of that down. But the flip side of that is that a lot of the fuel cell vehicles require a lot of platinum for them to be able to get their reactions to work.
So, because that was one of my questions. So EVs don't necessarily solve this problem.
Well, they do on one side. Is that they will solve the requirement for a catalytic converter. But one style of EV, your hydrogen fuel cells, which are going to be a large portion of the large size vehicles, your diesel type vehicles, they require platinum for the anodes in the hydrogen fuel cell. So the demand for platinum is actually expected to increase even if the demand for catalytic converters decrease. And from our side,
that's fascinating.
You look at our supply, even after the last internal combustion engine comes off the line, you still have another 10 to 15 years of supply because there's all the vehicles that are in circulation that will come through as their natural life is. You're not going to just take a 2-year-old vehicle and scrap it because you want to move to EVs. You're going to have them stay out their normal useful life of about 10 to 15 years.
Right, right. So if we don't solve this, what's the worst that could happen? If nobody does anything, if it's business as usual, if that shortage continues, if that gap continues to widen?
Well, what it does, it limits growth, is that you can't keep adding vehicles. Seen some statistics where for every 1,000 people in North America, there is 800 vehicles. So the 2-car home, the 3-car home,
Right.
those are going to have to be downsized.
Which we love. Americans will love that idea. You're in Canada.
Yes.
Americans will love that concept, I'm sure. So a big issue, and there's no real way out. So what makes you personally, on a personal note, interested in circular economy? That's one of my favorite subjects to talk about. Reusing, recycling, making use of old things. Do you care? Is it an environmental reason? What got you into this field?
Well, to be honest, first off, it was economic. It was a place where we're looking at saying there's an opportunity here. And where I look at most of the decisions, the best decisions, usually have a good economic baseline, because it's the only way that you're going to get movement, is that they have to make sense. If it doesn't make sense, you're going to get a lot of pushback and traction and all those types of issues. So you're looking in areas where things make sense to have happen. And it's a piece of going, there is a finite amount, and we've got to find different ways to extend the life. One of the real nice things that we look at from ours is that we're not recycling as much as we're regenerating. Your traditional recycling, and I've given an example of this a few times, of a white piece of paper. When you recycle that white piece of paper, it doesn't come back as white paper. It comes back as a cardboard, comes back as a lesser product. So most of the recycling you have right now is dropping down the value chain as it comes in.
Sure.
In what we do, and what a lot of other called urban mining does, is that it regenerates back to the natural state. So the platinum and palladium that comes out the back end of our process is exactly the same as the platinum and palladium that came out of the ground. And so it can be used for every piece of the original. So it's truly a circular type piece, because there's no difference between what you started from and what you're getting at the back end.
That's incredible. So that's like aluminum. People often say that aluminum is recycled a lot. We know that plastics can't be, and other things. So is it like that, where it can just keep being run over again with no limit?
Yeah, all your base metals are, I have to caveat a little bit, is sometimes your alloys can't, depending on what's in them, but all your base metals become the same thing that they started from.
I love that concept. So what would be the maximum then efficiency that we could hope to achieve? Do you think you could, like 90% could potentially be recycled? Or
I do think we could be up in that. A lot of it has to do with supply chain and how the end of life is encouraged. There has to be some push to make it able to collect all the end of life pieces.
What do you think that might look like? What would a push like that be?
Well, some of it is on how you incentivize the end of life user. One great example, and it's used by the automotive currently in the circular part, is the concept of a core charge. And that when they pull off a piece, your mechanic pulls it off, they return it to the manufacturer and get a rebate. So those types of programs where there's an incentive for the person who's doing the piece to get it back to the supply chain becomes a real game changer.
For you personally, how many employees do you have in your company now?
We only have about 12 right now.
Okay, so relatively early. And when did you start?
I started with them in 2000, and we started the catalytic converter stuff in 2020.
How do you feel that it's been in the investment climate? Have people reacted favorably to the idea? Have people been on board right away, or did it take some time to explain it?
It takes some time. People are excited by the story, but always want results faster than what you have. It's a complicated piece that we're doing. It's a one of a kind. It's a first of a kind. So you get the ups and downs, the excitement, and then you should be done. You should be full up. You should be ready. So we've had successes, failures, steps forward, step back. We have constantly moved forward, but it's not as fast as some people would have liked.
I guess it never is. Do you feel like you were always entrepreneurial personally, or is this your first venture of this sort?
I like to figure out how to make things work, and so have drifted to places where I could try to help and figure out how to move things forward. Company previous to this, I was with them, and we grew from 23 million to over 400 million in less than a 10-year period. And so it was figuring out how to manage that growth, how to put systems in place, how to put the controls and all those items that you move from being able to own or manage to professional manage. So those are the types of opportunities that have always interested and challenged me.
Do you have any regrets along this path? Do you feel that you made the right decision?
Oh, we've made most of the right decisions. I can't say that we were perfect, but we were doing the best we could with the information we had. Looking back in hindsight, you talk about the investing community. We wish we would have tempered expectations a lot better, but we didn't know what we didn't know. We kept thinking things would work first time, and you get some things that do and some things that don't.
So one of those things that I'm very fascinated with, one of the ongoing themes of this show is, can sustainable ideas and capitalism, or the desire to make a profit or money, can they coexist? A lot of people now believe that they might be fundamentally at odds, especially as companies and corporations grow, that the interest of maximizing shareholder value might be fundamentally at odds with the interest of preserving the planet or sustainability or eco-friendly ideas. I love exploring people who are right there at that intersection. You mentioned that it was first and foremost an economic opportunity that you saw. Do you think that many of the challenges that we face can be solved by business? Do you think that motive will help us get out of some of the greatest challenges facing humanity at the moment?
I am optimistic, and I am optimistic in the capitalism role of that, in the fact that if things become too dire, the groups that are pushing in one direction are going to cease to exist anyways. So the only way to move forward is innovate. I mean, the worst thing we can do is just say, you've got to stop this. Well, that's not going to work. It's never worked for anything in humanity. Humanity's only ever worked by innovating and figuring out how to do things differently. And there are large legacy companies, industries. We've seen this throughout the whole history of ourselves. You look back, the conversion to oil itself was a radical change. The conversion to electricity was a radical change. So all those innovations that happened upset completely what the current system was. And the only reason that upset happened was because it showed people that life could be better and the better way to enjoy the future. So capitalism always has been about figuring out ways to make a better future, because if you offer a better product future, you're going to increase your portion of that world. So there will be pieces that will come. No change happens easily. I mean, I said the oil, I said changing to an automobile. The carriage groups weren't sitting there saying, oh yeah, replace me. But it happened because it was the right decision. So I see the future as optimistic, because if we know we have to change, people are going to be investigating how to become that. And even if you look at some of the legacy groups that are the most hesitant to it, they will see the writing on the wall, and they have to look how they will pivot. An oil company. Well, an oil company is great at distribution, really. When it looks at it, is they're great at moving product to the areas that it needs to. So in a new electronic economy, well, we need to improve the grid. Well, who's better at trying to figure out how to improve how distribution happens than some of these legacy groups?
Yep. I completely agree. That makes a lot of sense. It does seem like you might be a little bit ahead of the curve. Maybe some people need it to be a dire situation before they recognize that opportunity. But it seems from my point of view that we're very comfortable throwing away a lot of value in a literal sense. We have all of these things, they end up in a landfill. How much platinum is in a landfill or at the bottom of the ocean because people just dumped it? Probably tons, right?
Yes. I mean, there's only two places that it happened. It's gotten to a landfill. I said 35%. So that other 70% has been wasted.
It's just shocking to me. I hope this is the start of a trend where people start realizing that there's enormous value in stuff like that. Because I don't know if you ever watched the show Mad Men. It talks with Don Draper and Madison Avenue. A great show for somebody who owns an agency like me. There's a great scene, and maybe even the pilot or one of the first episodes, where he goes out for a picnic with his family before it all falls apart. And they're drinking some cans and eating their picnic. And then after the picnic, he just throws the can in the grass and gets in his car and leaves. Before littering was a thing. And you think, as a species, we've just been so bad at separating the idea that this is a product that I buy from the shelf, this is something that I consume, and then there's no more value there at the end of that. Recapturing that in any way, but I think we know that there can be tons of value in the stuff that we throw away.
Well, and that same story there also leads me to the side on the optimist side, is that it shows that we recognized things, and you took that can that we're now horrified of the concept that you would throw that in the grass. Right. We're all knowing, well, you put that in the recycling. You just look at how short a period of time that mindset change. And you can even look at it, like I have kids in university, and some of the concepts and mindsets of recycling that they do versus what I did at their age. And that's just one generation on how quickly we can change our attitudes is where I see the optimism.
I love it. It's a great viewpoint, one that we all need, and not just optimism, but something that you're doing something about it. You're actually embodying that change, which is even cooler than just blind optimism. Somebody else is going to solve this problem. So kudos to you for doing that. I think it's awesome, and I'm really glad we got the chance to talk. Is there any insight that you have learned or something that you know now that you're into this process since 2000 that you didn't know when you started? Something that changed in your perspective?
Well, the one part that I like to talk about a little bit is, and especially coming from a mining industry and into the clean tech, and I've seen all sides of this continuum, and it's the collaboration side. It's that we've got to fix things in the future, we need to collaborate. And the first side of collaborating is to stop attacking. Is that what I've seen too much of is on the clean side, is that the attack against legacy, the attack against mining and people who are in the mining industry. And just those things saying, you're doing bad, you should stop, you're destroying the environment. Well, they have a livelihood that they're trying to do. And some of the people in mining, all mines, majority of them are all in rural areas. So they're a lot of the people who really appreciate the outdoors, but they get attacked for the type of work that they do. And that attacking doesn't foster figuring out solutions. It fosters defense. It fosters setting up walls, and it fosters remaining a legacy. Well, I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing to screw you because you attacked me. What we have to do is start saying it's not the fault of the people. It is figuring out, well, how do we find solutions together and start collaborating and stop attacking?
What a powerful sentiment that is, man. If we could all just live that a little more in our lives, what a better place this world would be. I love that. I love that a lot. And I think we're all guilty of a lot of the things that we accuse others of. I mean, I know I certainly am. There are so many aspects of our lives where we benefit from industries, but then we can condemn people who are doing things in that industry. I have electronics all around me. We're talking on a computer. We all benefit from all of these things. So it is a little bit hypocritical, the average person, to attack somebody who's making their lifestyle possible. Yep, wise words. Well, thanks again, Don. It's been really a pleasure. I think it's so cool what you're doing. I hope that we can shed some light on this topic and spread it. And also, it's a very personally inspiring story that you have taken action in this way and found a unique economic opportunity at the forefront of an industry that's never existed before. So to wrap up our conversation, any parting words? You've already thrown in some gems in there. Anything that you'd like to say to the audience or advice? Maybe people following a similar path? The floor is yours.
Well, I would just like to roll it back is that we're a public company. So we are looking for support and investors in us. We're traded on the Canadian exchange as RGX, and we're traded in the US as regenx.tech. So if you're interested in the story and want to follow and want to invest in us, we are happy to be a part of that. We think we're doing good things, and we hope to grow it and grow it into the future.
Well, I think you'll do just that. It seems like all trends are pointing in the right direction. So thanks again, Don. Really appreciate you and your insight. Thanks for taking the time to join me today. And with that, the official podcast is over.